All right, for more on this now, we want to bring in former U.S. ambassador to Israel and Egypt, Daniel Kurtzer. He's now currently a professor at Princeton's Woodrow Wilson School of International Affairs. Ambassador, we saw some of the events unfolding right now in Israel. I think what sort of moved me the most was the jarring difference between what's happening along the Gaza Strip versus what's happening in Jerusalem with the opening of this embassy. We have said this over and over again that this is historic. But take us through this. Why is this truly a historic moment for Israel?
Well, for decades, the United States has recognized that a decision on Jerusalem would impact the United States' role in trying to broker a Middle East peace settlement. Almost all presidents would have told you that, of course, Israel's capital is in Jerusalem. There's never really been any doubt about that. But if the United States has asserted a role in trying to broker a peace settlement, it also had to recognize that Palestinians had a claim to a capital in East Jerusalem. And therefore, successive administrations decided that they would rather accept the reality of not having an embassy in Jerusalem and maintaining a strong U.S. role in the peace process rather than upsetting that. The Trump administration decided differently. They decided that it was important to move the embassy. You've seen the reaction. The Palestinians now don't even talk to the Trump administration. They don't talk to U.S. officials. President Mahmoud Abbas has said that the United States has forfeited its role. So we have an embassy in Jerusalem, but we don't have a U.S. role in the peace process. And I'm not sure that adds up to a victory for anybody.
If it's not about the U.S. and its role in the peace process, what do you believe this move is about?
Well, certainly the president said it when he announced that he was the first president to do this, and this was appealing to his base, fulfilling a campaign promise. A lot of presidents made such campaign promises, but once they assumed office, understood the implications of fulfilling that promise at the expense of the peace process. This president apparently doesn't care, we're just going to move ahead now with a kind of isolated American role in the Middle East. You see what's happening on the ground. As you said, it's jarring. As Holly Williams indicated, it reflects the frustration and anger in Gaza and the West Bank. I'm not sure how this benefits anybody simply by moving an embassy 50 miles up the road. It seems to make no sense whatsoever diplomatically.
Mr. Ambassador, certainly, as we've been pointing out, Israelis are very happy that this is happening, even if it's a symbolic move. But to your point about President Trump's understanding of the Middle East peace process, it seems now that the likelihood of a two-state solution, the likelihood of at least attempting to suggest that East Jerusalem will receive the benefiction of the United States by saying we're going to put a capital in East Jerusalem, thereby sort of attempting to create this two-state solution, which both Israelis and Palestinians have talked about as part of the peace process. Is that at all feasible? Is that at all possible given what's happened over the last couple of months?
It's hard to imagine it, even though it's necessary. Look, Israel and the Palestinians agreed as far ago as 1993 that Jerusalem was going to be negotiated, its status. And the assumption was that there would be a way to meet the requirements of both sides in a final status outcome. Imagine, Vlad, how different it would have been had the president said, I want to recognize Israel's capital is in Jerusalem, and I also want to tell the Palestinians that when there is a state, I will put the American embassy to Palestine in East Jerusalem. In that way, the United States would have said, look, we recognize both sides have a claim. But the president went on to say that he's taking the issue of Jerusalem off the table, which sends a signal to the Palestinians that they can't even raise the argument when the United States is playing a role in the peace process. And that's why I think President Mahmoud Abbas of the Palestinian Authority has said he doesn't want the United States in the room anymore. He would like to see some international coalition helping the Palestinians and Israelis try to reach an arrangement.
And Ambassador, I'm curious also your take on, other recent events. The U.S. pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal, Iran targeting, or rather Israel targeting Iranian positions in Syria. And then this move, and you recall when the discussion came up about moving the embassy initially it was thought, oh, well, you know, it won't happen for years anyway. But it's happening at a sort of very crucial time in the Middle East. I'm just curious about your sort of point of view and your take on it.
Well, we've really turned Middle East politics and the U.S. role in the Middle East on its head. You know, the Iran nuclear deal was working. Almost no one argued differently. There were arguments that were valid that the deal did not include Iran's malign activities in the region, such as what it's doing in Syria or in Yemen, its support for terrorism, its missile development. Those are very serious problems to which the United States has needed to respond. But in terms of the deal itself, which was to stop the Iranian nuclear program in its tracks, there's no expert on nonproliferation who argued differently. There was only the argument of what the deal didn't include. So by pulling out without an alternative strategy, by pulling out after we had been talking to the Europeans, the Russians and the Chinese about trying to amend the deal, has made no strategic sense whatsoever and has endangered not just the United States, but also the state of Israel. You also have this problem in Syria where Iran is trying to entrench its proxies, Hezbollah and others, in order to present a threat to Israel, and that threat has now been heightened. I think this was a logical consequence of very bad moves by the United States to pull out of the Iran deal, to make this arrangement in Jerusalem at a time of such sensitivity and danger in the Middle East.
Ambassador, to jump off Anne-Marie's question with regards to the Iran nuclear deal, it appears that Iran is going to be taking its case to other partners that are part of that deal. I wonder, in this case of the two-state solution, the Palestinian and the Israeli peace process going forward, why should Israelis and Palestinians look to the United States as the leader to broker any kind of responsibility? Why can't the two parties now look to European and other allies to perhaps facilitate this? Because for too many years, it's been the United States that's taken the lead in trying to figure this problem out. You point back to 1993 and all the accords that have happened subsequent to that, they've led to absolutely nothing other than this controversial move. So I wonder if there's an opportunity for other countries, because we know, for example, that of the 80-plus invitations that went to foreign dignitaries, less than half of those invited chose to attend this moment, thereby suggesting that they are not supportive of the United States and what they have done here. So why not go to some of these others, and why not have other countries, France, for example, which has one of the largest Jewish populations in Europe, why can't France take the lead?
Well, first of all, the peace process since '93 has not led to nothing. We've had a Jordanian peace treaty. There have been a number of interactions between Israelis and Palestinians, most recently in the late Obama administration, which have narrowed the gaps. So there has been some progress made. We just haven't reached a conclusion. The reality is that the parties have always turned to the United States because of our relationship with Israel, the assumption being that it was only the United States that could entice from Israel those kinds of concessions that involve risks, and that the United States could try to minimize those risks because of our relationship. There's nothing inherently wrong or silly about trying to get others to do the same thing. It will simply be harder because of the close relationship that the U.S. has with Israel, and the reality is that Israel may be able to turn down the efforts of others for fear that it will be taking risks that will not be compensated.